I would like to welcome you to this session about transfers, the changing in the transfer market. For me, it's a particular honor to be here in Portugal as a Brazilian. I just, one small remark in the beginning, Deco, in order to celebrate also his career here in Portugal, and out of respect for the audience that speaks Portuguese, will answer in Portuguese his questions. Although I'm going to address his questions in English. You have the translation if you need. And I'm not going to take so long in these preliminary words because we don't have plenty of time. I will invite our guests, speakers. All of them are famous, so we don't need to present every and each one of them. And I just like to say that in the end, we're going to receive some questions from the audience if you feel comfortable to do that. And right away, we're going to have Steve here, because in order to have a landscape, to check the landscape that we will analyze deeply with our speakers here, we're going to begin with a very detailed work from Steve in regards to the numbers involved in the last year within the 5 big leagues. So I give you the floor, Esteve, please.
Not sure if I don't need this one. Can you hear me well? No. Hello? Okay. This is the one that works. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here with the Soccerex family. It's been now, we're speaking to David earlier, probably it's the 8th time that we do football transfer review presentation alongside with Soccerex. For those knowing or not that familiar with the report, this is a report that we've been doing at Primetime Sport for the last 10 years. This is actually the 11th year which we are doing it. And what we do in this report is we analyze in depth how did the top 5 European leagues perform in terms of transfer activity. And obviously back in 2009 when we started and comparing to now, we've seen a huge transformation in the industry that we are all well aware of. What you will see today will be uploaded in primetimesport.com, our website, tomorrow as of lunchtime. So this is an exclusive preview for Soccerex, but the full in-depth analysis and report it's available for free in our website, and it will be there as of tomorrow. I'm not going to spend much time on how the report works, but as I said, we analyze the top 5 European leagues, and we try to come up with numbers and insight into what happened in the industry. So I think it's going to be a good setup for us to have a conversation later. And again, I'm not going to go one by one, but first of all, what we do, this is a report that first goes through Europe and top 5 European leagues, and then there's more insight and focus and zoom on Spanish La Liga Santander, which again, I'm just going to do the European part today, but those interested will have plenty of insight and detailed information into the full report. That's going to be available tomorrow, lunchtime, as I said. So what happened in European football? No news to anyone. We've seen the investment in new players growing and growing and growing. It's now 4.7 billion. This is the total invested this summer by top 5 European leagues, 11% up versus last year, and obviously a huge transformation. If we look back, when we started the report, we were at 1.3 billion. So we've seen the investment multiplied by 3, and it's going to be a good starting point for us to comment. And then, if we look at where does this growth come from, we still have the Premier League as the driving force in European football. However, we have seen the leagues catching up rapidly, but still, Premier League invested 1.5 billion euros, 8% up But then La Liga invested 1.3 billion, 49% up. So one of the things that we have started to see is that given the fact that the last cycle of TV rights in the Premier League hasn't seen a growth as we were used to see, if you look at the numbers from this, sorry, I just apologize about that. Sorry. It must be very interesting because no one was complaining. So I was just going through this slide. So as I said, huge transformation in the industry. We've seen 11% growth this summer, but again, we've seen a multiplication by 3. It's an amazing growth and transformation in the industry. And as I was just saying, Premier League is, of course, still the most relevant and the driving force in terms of investment. But for the last 4 years, we've seen a clear stagnation of that growth. So still ahead, still number one, but not as much, just because we've seen the revenues also stagnating a little bit, primarily because of the TV rights flattening up a little bit. La Liga has been number 2 this summer, followed by Serie A, which is bouncing back again, coming back from its gold times. Very interestingly, as I was saying, in this slide, what we see is the gap between the Premier League and La Liga and Serie A. So 3 years ago, La Liga would represent only 1/3 of how much Premier League would have invested. Now, in this summer, after investing 1.3 billion euros, it's already 87%. So it's really catching up and closing the gap. Interestingly enough, as I said before, we see the same situation in Serie A, which is 77% of what Serie A has invested, 77% of what Premier League has invested, sorry. So this is one of the headlines of the report. Huge growth, big numbers, 4.7 billion in Europe, but not driven by Premier League growth, but more importantly, driven by the growth of other leagues. We always like to look at the concentration of the investment in each league, and we keep on seeing the Premier League because of the way the TV rights are spread and split. We call it like the least concentrated league. Only 41% of the total investment has been done by 4 teams, while in Spain it's 73%. Interestingly enough, in Spain there's been a significant transformation as well, because we were used to see only Barcelona and Real Madrid investing big. Now it's not anymore a game of 2, but I would say it's a game of 3, because Atletico has come up very strong and is now among the top teams, both in terms of in transfer activity, both in terms of acquisition and selling of players. In terms of sales, this is also a very interesting piece of information. So La Liga teams, La Liga sides were those that sold for more amount. So for the first time, La Liga sides have collected more than 1 billion euros in revenues. This is 29% up from last year, but still, even the Premier League has collected 810 million euros. This is very important to take into account, because since the establishment of the financial fair play by UEFA, what happened is that the way the clubs are financing their signings is no longer because of the shareholder injecting money, but it's more and more because of the players trading. And as we will see later, we see some of the top teams in the top rankings of the most selling, most active clubs in terms of players' sales in Europe. So then, again, when we look at the net spending, Premier League still the far ahead the other leagues, and on the other extreme we see the Ligue 1 in France, which, as we know, is very prolific in terms of producing players and those players being sold abroad, as we can see here. So League One in France has had 2 consecutive years of negative investment just because they sold for more value than they spent on new players. The top teams in terms of spending this summer, we've seen Real Madrid back to the top after investing more than 300 million euros. We had not seen Real Madrid at the top since 2013, where there was also another important transformation at the club. But we see, as I was mentioning before, we see the top 3 Spanish clubs, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico, leading the way in Europe. We only see 2 Premier League teams in the, 3 Premier League teams in the top 10, and we were used to seeing in the past 5 or 6. So this is, again, another proof of what I was mentioning before. So these huge numbers mean that this summer we've seen 3 teams investing more than ever. So the record high of a transfer window was Paris Saint-Germain back in 2017 when they invested more than 400 million. But now Real Madrid, with the investment of this year, is the second highest in history of transfer windows. In terms of sales, Atletico has been the most active team, having sold for more than 300 million euros, which is obviously a very significant amount. But interestingly enough, as I was mentioning before, in the past, when we're doing this report, we would normally see only Oporto, Sevilla, Benfica, Monaco. These would be the traditionally selling clubs. This has changed completely. The landscape has changed. And it's interesting to see among the top selling clubs, top clubs such as Juventus, Real Madrid, Barcelona, those clubs have become selling clubs as well. Every club, any club, is now very active selling players, because this is the way you end up financing most of the expenditure in new players. And interestingly enough, more and more there are transfers among top teams. So this is a list of transfers that happened this summer. It's a significant amount, and many others that could have happened and that did not happen at the end of the day. But again, it has become common practice that top teams sit down, negotiate, and agree deals, or sometimes it's just because, like it happened with Griezmann, a club triggers the release clause that there is in the contract. So, interestingly enough, as I was saying before, Barcelona, Atletico, and Real Madrid have been the busiest clubs in Europe, and adding up the amount that they've been trading, both in terms of selling and buying players, it's a combining whopping 1.4 billion euros that Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Atletico have been trading during the summer, which is obviously a huge amount. In terms of the most expensive, the most expensive player was, of course, a player that was playing in here until this summer. João Felix, at just 19, has become the most expensive signing of the summer, 126 million euros, followed by Griezmann, 120, and Hazard, 100 million euros. And something that we also like to look at the report is how the players have performed. Those players that were the most expensive from last season, how did they perform, whether they were profitable or not in terms of whether they were used regularly. So this slide here shows that, for instance, Alisson was the most productive or profitable signing of the most expensive of last year because he played 100% of the minutes, like almost Kepa, Jorginho, and Ronaldo. In the other extreme, we have other expensive players that did not play regularly, and like such as Mahrez, 39% of the minutes, Fred at Manchester United, also 1/3 of the minutes, or Vinicius in Real Madrid, 1/4 of the minutes. So if we look at the Hall of Fame of most expensive transfers in history, this summer saw 3 newcomers. With the biggest ever is still Neymar, followed by Mbappé, both done by PSG a couple of years ago. But then Joao Felix, Griezmann, and Hazard, all of them above 100 million, have joined the top 10 in history. And if we look at the most expensive signing of every summer transfer window, we will see that this is the 4th consecutive year in which the most expensive signing has been above 100 million euros. So again, very significant transformation. And interestingly enough, every time the average age of the most expensive player goes down and down and down. So as you can see in this slide, in 2010, it was 25.5 years, the average of the top 10 most expensive, and now it's 23.9. So it's going down gradually just because teams try to secure players when they are younger, because if they are already established, it's more difficult that the clubs that have them agree to sell them. Okay, just to finish and open up the debate, a couple of interesting slides about La Liga. We obviously have seen Mr. Tebas earlier in this room. One of the things that Javier always talks about and is more proud of is the fact that with the changes implemented in La Liga, with the centralized TV rights, etc., it's no longer a league driven only by Barcelona and Real Madrid. So back in 2009, Barcelona and Real Madrid would account for 80%, 80, of the total expenditure in new players, whereas this summer it's only been 43%. So this is a big change in Spain. Is no longer about Barcelona and Real Madrid. And then, interestingly enough, just because of this change, this possibility for the smaller clubs to invest better, we've seen that more and more small clubs can invest heavy, just like it happens in the Premier League. So in 2015, we would have like only 7 teams in La Liga could invest more than 10 million in player signings. This summer it's been 15, okay? So these are the numbers that I wanted to share with you just now. As I said, you will be able to look at the full report as of tomorrow. And as a wrap up, growth in the player transfer window in Europe, big time, but more and more driven by the other leagues. So these leagues are catching up and getting closer to the Premier League. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I think we have here what we could call the good news in regards to the records that are being broken in terms of numbers, figures. We can add to that the huge amounts that are invested by the ownerships of the clubs, the money that comes from sponsorship and so on, as the revenues that we have. We see a lot of money flowing in the 5 big leagues. On the other hand, this is the best part of the deal. On the other hand, we have some circumstances that may affect or are already affecting the transfer marketing. That has to do with the new rules in place, with the changes in the transfers regulations of FIFA. That has to do with the Brexit. That has to do with many circumstances that are being conceived inside the world of football itself or outside, like the influx of Brexit that we don't know. It seems that the Brexit is in the middle way. I'm not going to jump into that. Maybe some of our guests can give us a clue of what can happen, which will be the possible consequences if the Brexit is effectively enforced. But beginning with you, Tel, what these numbers, how do they represent something profitable or something that can improve the situation of the players? With your experience ahead of the initiatives of Fifth Pro, you have been experiencing all this tension that is usual. The difference between the treatment that the players that plays in the 5 big leagues and the other ones, that is the vast majority of the players all over the world.
Yes, yes, of course. Well, I'm aware of the figures, and thank you for doing this presentation. But yeah, the reality in football is, of course, also completely different. I can give you some figures. We are talking about, let's say, more or less 70 countries where real professional football is played in the world. You all know that FIFA has more than 200 members. We all know that in the 70 countries we are talking about, let's say, between the 60 and 65,000 members. 50% of these members, professional football players, playing every day, training every day, and playing in the weekends. 50% of these players are not earning more than $2,000. And from that 50% of the players who are earning only $2,000 per month, another 50% is not paid at all, or is paid much too late. So for us, it is of course very interesting to see that in the 5 big countries in Europe, where another figure, 98% of the top players are playing from all over the world. And it shows that, of course, and that is the problem we have to discuss, and that is the reason why FIFA came with this white paper, where with facts and figures we've seen that the system of 2001 introduced by the European Commission, UEFA and FIFA, is not functioning at all. Because the time has changed, we have now, within the professional football world, we have this, I call it not clubs anymore. These are, in fact, money makers. These are commercial companies. I give you 2-3 examples, and that's the reason why we have to change the rules. Is it normal that Chelsea has 150 players on loan in the world of football? One example. Another example is it normal, with all respect for Manchester City, which is a very, very professional club, that they have all over the world, they own other clubs, and that they are having the possibility. This is a commercial thing. Now, I am defending more than 60,000 players. And we're talking also, Tebas this morning was talking about the income in the leagues. Do we also realize that all these players are playing football at the age of 7, and that they all, in Brazil, everywhere in the world, that they all do this because they start playing at 7. So, in my opinion, just to close, the transfer regulations, as they are now, and I'm not going into details, are completely old-fashioned, and I think that the leagues, even the ECA, even also UEFA, even the FIFA and all the other confederations realize that we have to change that. Because it is not normal that we have the top players only in Europe. What we want is that every player, let's have a dream, that we have 100 countries where professional football is played, where the players are paid, and that we have 100 leagues who can survive. Now, we are far away with this new development of that. And that is a concern not only from the players, that has to be a concern of the agents, that has to be a concern of the federations, the leagues, and everybody, and by the way, also of the public.
Let me just to finish for now with your position, just one question. I know that you feel like maybe we didn't reach halfway with this this cooperation between FIFPro, let's say like that, ECA and FIFA. I think it's a good step from FIFA to accept the contribution of FIFPro, ECA. But in regard specifically to these players that are beginners, that they don't play for the big leagues, do you think, is there any tool that can be improved to make them earn a little bit more than the 1,000, and the reform in regards to specifically overdue payables? And I mean, just to making as a necessary only 2 months of delay to make sure that the player can terminate the contract with Just Cause. Is it a good tool? You think it's going to improve a little bit, at least, the situation of the players?
I'm always an optimistic, and I think that there is no other choice for all the stakeholders. And in FIFA, as you all know, they are all together to find a solution for the general problem. And we started, and we call it also, it was the project, the narrow issues. That means that we are changing together with the permission of all of us the rules, because it's not only a question only, and the clubs realize that it is not normal that you sign contracts with players and you don't pay them. And you both know that that is, of course, a disgrace. I will not go into detail, but the narrow issues, we have had a commitment, and these rules are implemented already 1 or 2 years, and you see the results now. There's another aspect also for the clubs, but is it normal that you have a club in Turkey who's not paying any player, and there is another club in Turkey who's always paying the players? There's also a sportive imbalance with that. So the clubs also realize that the players, professional players, have to be paid, because in a competition it can even be a matter of integrity. Right. That is done, and we are happy with that, but much more has to be done.
But I think it's fair. If you don't pay your players, you should not be allowed to hire another player, because you are creating a new contingent of creditors. And Deco, with your long career and very successful as a player, no need to comment on that. In comparison to your career as a player, you are now in a new path. So how do you see that? What do you look for when you're taking care of the interests of the players you represent now? What do you look at in a relationship with a club? Either from the side of protecting the players' interests and also to build a relationship for yourself as an agent that follow the rules and everything, which kind of clubs you are more comfortable to deal with, because you know that your client, the player, will be well treated and will get paid. And I know that you deal with players that are already established, they are famous, and you also deal with players that are being formed yet.
Sorry, Portuguese, because there's a lot of Portuguese people here, and I prefer to speak in Portuguese. Sorry.
Obviously, when we work with the players, we always try to seek for the best solution in every sense. These figures we have just seen are fantastic, but on the other hand, what we are talking about, what I was mentioning about all the problems that exist on players, is an entirely world apart, all these figures. This is a matter that needs in-depth debate, a lot of help. We have to deeply understand about FIFA and the UEFA, together with the experts on this. FIFA can help us a lot. It's not easy. We manage a little bit of these. All these figures are public. We live in the era of information. Players are more informed today. They know what is happening. They know the salaries the other obtain. They know what the great clubs pay. They know about the big transfers. But that is not the world, the football, generally speaking. When it's at a very high level, some would only work at an average level or intermediate level, but they are all pros with the same responsibility and with the same rights and duties. Therefore, we talk about the top of the pyramid and we look at those fantastic figures. It's difficult to manage that anxiety with the players, in order to manage to help them to understand that that happens step by step. A career cannot be built overnight. And nowadays, due to that information, it's true, football has those rare cases when players aren't in a club for more than a year. We have in Portugal, we have several types of clubs, several sizes, but it's difficult for players to remain. Sometimes they used to remain more time at the club. It's not easy to manage all this. There are several agents in the market working, but it's not easy. to manage that emotion, that anxiety that exists today in today's players. Of course, when we're dealing with a club, we know there are clubs that are serious. Unfortunately, there are cases as the ones that were mentioned, and that regulation, it's not possible not to pay a player and then pay him again later. There's a lot of work to be done. Those are spectacular figures, all the major leagues growing. Great work was undertaken at the Spanish league, work of financial allocation that led to the players earning salaries where they could have a career, include clubs that didn't play in Barcelona. They could play elsewhere and earning money and be perfectly successful. There has to be a balance between being successful in sport and being economically successful. So that's what we try to convey. In order to be economically successful, you have to be successful in sports too. That comes first. It's not easy. Nowadays, with the information that exists nowadays, we have social networks that 10 years ago they did not exist, or 15 years ago. It's not easy. That deals with emotions, with anxiety, with the players' day-to-day basis. It's not easy. Everything is much swifter. Both being successful or not, clubs have more money. They are more prepared. If a player doesn't work, they bring another one the next season. But on the other hand, it's madness. It's a difficult management. We try to find this balance anyway.
Spoken about the top of the pyramid. We could say that the top of the pyramid, in your case, maybe one of them is Ozil. But you also take care of other players that are being developed or will develop their skills to play in a high level. I would like to focus in the role of the agents. I know that you are very involved in try to educate or to try to lead, and you worked in the workshops in this kind of task force of FIFA, contributing with your view in regards to specifically, I know you like to do these two main core principles, that is education and integrity in regards to the activities developed by an agent. How could you describe that? How that could be used as a tool to improve the situation of the players, the relationship between the clubs, and autonomously also the interests of a healthy market in regards to the agency activities?
Thank you. First of all, I think most of you probably know that since 2015 we have a deregulation of the agents. So there's literally no main regulation system which is bound to all over the world for every country. So literally every federation is doing its own regulations right now, and which is not a good situation. I think there's a common sense right now, after the 5 or 4 years, that this has to change. I mean, everyone can see that, and it's very simple to become an agent today. You just go register yourself, you pay £500 or £400, and you can start tomorrow being an agent and representing a football player's future life, which shouldn't be so easy. Yeah? There is no education background, nothing is asked for it. Like we discussed with Dick over there, as a coach, you need to pass certain levels to be then able to be coaching in the highest level. So there's a system, there's a level you have to achieve. For agents, at the moment, there's nothing. So if one of you guys, I was talking to you when I come in, he's interested, if you want to get into the business, register yourself, start. Registering is the first part and the easy part. The difficult part is then, how do you survive in this business? And I've seen in the last 15 years so many things, you wouldn't believe it. So sometimes I think it's good to say about, like, I mean, we said education, yes. I'm an advocate for education all my life long. I'm a lecturer at universities, and I think agents need to be educated because it's good for the whole business, not for the agents themselves, as well for the clubs and for the federations, for everyone. I mean, but the difficult part is like, where do we start? What kind of agent system, what kind of education system should there be? And should FIFA control it? Again, that everyone has to pass an exam and FIFA controls all the agent. There could be a transparency system. For me as an agent, it's very difficult sometimes to find out who is the agent of that player, right? There are 50,000 mandates everywhere, and the best thing would be if there's a clearinghouse we have somewhere and I can go into it as a registered agent and can see, oh, that agent, that player is represented by that agent, so I can contact directly the agent, for example, yeah? And it starts with education. It's a long process, I think, and it will take years. But I think in the end, it has to change to be able, especially for younger agents who come into this business. I try to bring more educated agents into it. I do the opposite than my other colleagues. But I love to have more educated people. They're becoming my partners. Right? I do this now for 7 years, that I'm driving people into this business. Now I have educated partners in different countries. They share the same values. They share the same system, which I have. And I think it has to start somewhere. There's a long way to go. But I think it's a great profession. Not say they're always bad agents. I don't share this opinion. That's good, because agents have no real media who can put them in a different way. It's for the clubs easy to say, the bad agents, we pay them so much. Have you thought why clubs paying agents so much? Do they have to pay agents so much? Sometimes they're paying amazing sums to agents for a deal, right? Do they have to? Can't they say, no, we don't paying so much agents commission, we pay less? Why are in one deal sometimes 5 to 7 agents? Why isn't it one agent? Or two?
Where's the manager when you pay an agent?
So where's the sporting director? Sometimes I'm thinking, why is the sporting director in a football club if he's putting 3 agents into a deal?
Yeah.
Who's going this money? Like, where's this money going? Like, so why is a club willing sometimes to pay, in case of 1 million, 5 million to the agent in that deal? Is that club stupid? Is the people working there really stupid? No, they're not stupid.
Can we tackle that by, Can we tackle that by, as you mentioned in our previous conversation, like establishing a rule that could sanction, in terms of integrity or ethics or something, a manager, even to be banned in case it's caught like doing shady business?
Yeah, I mean,
do you think this could be a path?
Definitely. I mean, it should be for agents, definitely regulations, stronger ones. If they do something bad, like bad agents, they should be punished for that. But the same rules we need inside the clubs. There's where the power actually remains. If a sporting director, a board member, a coach is sharing money with an agent, it should be banned from football the whole life. And it should be a regulation at least there that some people say, okay, I should be careful what I do. Yeah. But there's nothing like that. They can do whatever they want. No one cares. They have their accounts at the Cayman Islands with sharing and do whatever they want. And no one is, they're always blamed on the bad agents. We pay so much money. You don't have to put 10 agents into one deal. No. But some people make money.
Sorry, Till, your thoughts.
We discussed it a little bit before. I'm happy because I'm sitting here because I have nothing against agents, because agents can play a role in football, and I'm sitting here with 2 good agents. Let's say it like that, and I mean that. And I'm heavily involved in the negotiations. It's a part of the negotiations. Because if you look at the package of measures which has to be taken, agents are playing a role, but it's just a part. Yeah. And it's all interlinked, because if you have regulation for agents, but you will not look at the other things, then you will never come to a conclusion. Because you also must have the guts to look at the transfer system, Article 17 for the lawyers among us. But to come back to the agents, I have been involved in the discussion about agents already my whole career with FIFPro. And you see that there are 2 real problems with agents. First of all, you are completely right. What happens is that the reason why there are no license as of 2012 anymore is that I was in the working group where we had everybody together. So representatives of the clubs, of the federations, everybody. And it was the last meeting, and in the last meeting we said, I give you some examples and you will agree, an agent cannot be an agent of the club, of the buying club, of the selling club, and the player. So there is a conflict of interest. In my opinion, you're an agent from the player, you're an agent of the selling club, or you are an agent of the buying club. Now, taking that into account, we had these regulations. And at the last moment, and I will not mention names, one of the top representative of one of the top clubs said, sorry, yeah, I'm going to, he didn't say anything, but at the end of the meeting he said, sorry, that I have to say that we will not agree any longer on what you have done in the last 3 years, because we, the club, we pay the agents what is necessary to get the player. Now, that was the reason, and there are no regulations anymore. I also fully agree with you that the regulations has to come back. To answer your question, the regulations has to come back, and we work hard on that at this moment with everybody. But again, it's not the only solution. And to come back to your question, I fully agree that an agent, but also all the people involved from the clubs, but also the players, has to realize what it means when you sign a contract with a club, but also they have to pay, but also when they sign a contract with an agent. And therefore, I am quite optimistic that we will tackle that problem, because it is really ridiculous that everybody in the world can make money and going, because that is also happens. Even in my country, in the Netherlands, where everything is well done, 16 years old, 15 years old players are signing with people who have never been involved in football. They go, never. And they give the parents of this poor family a scooter or a car or some cash money. But then they have to sign for the next.
In Brazil, a simple stove or refrigerator is fine. It's true.
No Brasil nós temos uma...
In Brazil, we have a new model, which is to purchase representation, the agent of the agent. That is something that has existed a lot. There are some agents sign with young players, and after a while, they go to other agents and sell a proxy, which is something really crazy and absurd, because the representation of the player is, we are talking about commitment here, and all the more so when we are talking about very young people with no knowledge. Unfortunately for us, in a country where we have some social problems, many people are not prepared, players that don't even know how to count, and a whole set of things. Unfortunately, due to the fact there is no binding minimum regulation with no control, some agents become agents of young people with a great potential, and then after a while the players are somehow successful and they go elsewhere. We sell him and we leave them without any structure at all. O que eu acho
Is that back there too, I think there was something that was not said, but also there was the wish of FIFA of not having jurisdiction anymore in regards to the claims of the agents against players and clubs. And that was bad, because I don't agree with the term deregulation, because indeed there's no centralized regulation. Because like we in Brazil, for instance, the club only received the burden, because if you, in Brazil, if you are dealing with a non-licensed before CBF agent, you as a club, you are sanctioned. But on the other hand, the agent is not granted with the right to go and sue the player or the club. So the system was fragmented, and there is something that is amazing, and I think you can comment on that. It's crazy. If you realize that in the last day of a certain transfer window in Brazil, you are an English agent, and you want to make a deal in Brazil, and you want to receive some amount from a Brazilian club, the club is only entitled to engage in a contract with you if you are registered before CBF. If you are a Chinese agent or an English, how you're going to achieve that register in the last day? So the system is no good for nobody, the agents, and to protect them. Let me just escape a little bit from this heavy subject and go a little bit to the area we explore with you, Esteve, like the capacity of specifically the Premier League clubs to retain players. How does the financial fair play plays a role in this capacity to retain? The limitation in terms of financial fair play, let's see, Fabinho, for instance, was announced as he would be hired by Real Madrid. In the end, there was this fear that he could not be replaced. Real Madrid, on the other hand, didn't have has already reached the limit to spend more. So how these circumstances and rules plays in order to determine that Fabinho goes or not, that Neymar leaves PSG or not? How does it plays with the career of a player and a transfer in this level?
Well, I mean, I think we all agree that financial fair play changed the landscape completely. So in the past, you would have clubs with wealthy shareholders, a sheikh, someone having made money in oil, whatever, just pumping money into the club and signing more and more players. This was the main reason why UEFA established financial fair play, to have something like more even. So it's not related to the capacity of a club to generate revenues, but it's related to it's related to the capacity to generate revenues. It means that over a period of 3 years, they tell you how much you can lose.
Sustainability.
Correct. So even if the sheikh is prepared to put a lot of money, UEFA comes and says, sorry, you can only lose 30 million over the next 3 years. You can lose 60 this year, but then you're accumulated. Overall needs to be that. Which means, as we've seen in the report, the big transformation means that top clubs have to get used to sell players. And this is, as I said before, I mean, seeing Barcelona, Juventus, Real Madrid,
counterintuitive
Chelsea,
for them.
yeah, and in the top 10 of selling clubs, it's a big transformation. And it means that, you know, Barcelona wanted to bring Neymar. They couldn't bring him because they couldn't release Dembélé, or they released Coutinho, but it was only a loan. So it has changed the landscape completely, and I think it has changed it for good. So it's a good regulation in this respect. As for how to regulate the agents market, I think there's no way to regulate it. You know, we've been seeing, we try to regulate TPOs, then people try to work ways around. You know, you can now go against what happens in the market. I mean, you can say you cannot pay a player, but then you maybe you pay his dad. So.
Are you in favor of a cap in the agents' fees, or you prefer a system where there's transparency and then free market in regards to the?
I think, and we're commenting this before, I think the agents market is regulated based on what creates public opinion. So, I mean, all of a sudden, an agent has made 20 million in a transaction, which is insane. We all admit that. So then, all of a sudden, regulation to avoid that's happening, and then it cuts the maximum percentage that someone can do on a deal. But it's not the same to do a 10% on a 100 million deal than a 10% on a 50,000 euro deal, right? So it means that all the agents find themselves regulated because of the abuse that you can see. Not the abuse, because it's fair enough. If a big agent does a big deal, great, but you cannot regulate against that. I mean, just cannot do it, right?
Can I? So I disagree, with all respect, because one of the new elements, which are very important, is that in these regulations, because if we have seen that if there are no regulations, it is even worse. But what is the idea, and I fully, and our organization fully agrees on that, if you are obliging the agents, that's the Dutch model we have, that when the contract is signed, and the player has to sign the contract at the club, the agent has to sign the contract too. In the contract, you also have to mention the amount, the fee which is paid to the agents. And the idea of FIFA is, because of the TMS system, that all the money, the transfer sum, the agent fee, has to go by the TMS. That means that it is a lot of work. That means that FIFA, on the international, with the international transfers, can follow the money stream. And if you, and that's the second point, if you are going to do that also and oblige it, which I'm very much in favor of, on the national level, that with national transfers, you also have to do it via the TMS system on national level, then I want to see if that does not have an effect. First of all, the player is aware of the fact and this is the only amount. Now, there's one thing where I think you have a point. What is happening then, if that is all done according to the TMS system, and the president of a club X is going to give him cash money under the table. But I think if we're going to be afraid for that, then we can better stop playing football, but I think that, and I strongly believe that we can at least for 85%, maybe 90%, we can create a system where we have the agents, where it is open, and if a player is happy, and to come back to the cap, the problem with the cap is, I am thinking that it is not normal that from the 6 billion transfer volume this year, 1 billion already in the last 5 years is leaving football because that is the fee of the agent. So if there have to be, in my opinion, there have to be standards. It's not normal that if a player is earning 1 million, that the agent will get also 1 million.
But listen,
I think it is possible to do much more than...
but I agree. I think the transparency is the key here, more than the cap. Because if you have transparency, the scrutiny of the public opinion, the players themselves, the clubs, automatically will decrease the amount of the... Because we just have gossips at the moment. We don't know. Just one... Good. We are almost on time, so I'll give you the floor to every and each one of you for one final remark at your choice. 1 minute, please.
Okay. Regarding this, the cap for agents, I just wanted to talk about it very briefly. You can cap it, but this is probably against competition law. So I'm pretty sure that some agents will go against it and they will probably win. So rather than capping it, rather bringing more we can bring 1,000 regulations, but if we don't educate the people inside the business, it doesn't help, because these people will always find ways around, as you said, under the table, or it's very simple to do that. So I think we can make as much as regulations we want. We can try to change, same with TPO. Once it's banned, they find ways around, right? They're buying shares in football clubs and winning money from. So there's always a way around, you know. So I think that's why I'm saying the basis is the people themselves, is the people who are educated inside the club and outside the club. If you don't give them a base of education, a system, a structure, everything else, you will always have. You can regulate whatever you want with caps, so it will never help. And if you really cap and say 3% for agents, this will damage in the end the new agents who are coming into the business, right? Because they can't survive at 3%. So rather you would cap them on a higher level. If the money is very high, you can cap them there. But you shouldn't cap, if someone just starting as an agent tomorrow, 3% out of, I don't know, 10,000 is, I mean, he can't survive with that as an agent. So I would keep it high for that level, but make it less if you're...
Otherwise, the player will not be well represented, because he's not going to afford a good professional to do that. Deco, your final remarks.
Eu acho que se fala muito sobre comissões.
I think one talks a lot about promotions, money, and people forget the players frequently. We are in a market with great visibility. The average salary of the first division, except the 3 big ones, we're talking about 5,000–6,000 euros. How can we gain any fee on this? If we manage the players to step into another level, it's almost impossible to live from that in Portugal. But a great job is undertaken. Money is always talked about, but people forget the players. All the figures, all that is very nice, but for me, the main point are the players, and there are a lot of debate on it. Ex-players, former players have no financial means. There's a great debate to be undertaken. If you focus on the players, everything will be solved.
I was just saying one thing that is changing a little bit, but it's still difficult to get it implemented, and it has to do also with tax regulations. But what we have started to see, and I think what needs to change, is the fact that players need to understand that they are the ones that have to play the agents, to pay the agents, sorry. So it's, I mean, clubs have started to complain about the fact that it's an obligation when you bring a player that you have to pay the agent of that player, when that agent is working for the player and not for you. So why would a club pay a commission to an agent? Maybe because they want to get rid of a player, and it's like, go to market and find me an offer and look around, and that's fair. You know, you bring me an offer, I pay a commission. The biggest thing, the most difficult thing that I've seen is how difficult it is to get players understanding that this is a service that the agents are doing for them. So they take it for granted that they don't have to pay, because it's so easy to become an agent that there's always going to be someone, while you're trying to get the player understanding that he's the one that has to pay you the commission, then another agent will show up and say, don't you worry, I will do it for free for you. So
And I'll charge only when I transfer, and I'll charge the club, not
exactly. And for instance, for tax reasons, obviously there's this thing about if the club is paying the agent on behalf of the player, that's considered value in kind remuneration, and that generates an income for the player, and the player has to pay tax for that, right? So I've seen cases in which, you know, we agree, like, as a club, I'm not going to pay the commission of the agent, so I will increase the salary of the player so that the player pays the commission. Obviously, 1 year later, the player has completely forgot that part of his salary was due to go to the agent, and then when you try to collect your money, there's another agent queuing up saying, like, you don't have to pay, I will do it for free for you.
And there's the other side of it, that is the agents putting image rights revenues in their companies and don't giving the money to the player in the end. So it's, the creativity is
Yes,
endless
exactly.
here. Tell your final words.
Very short because
Yeah.
of the time. I really hope, as a representative of FIFPro, representative of the players, that in the next 1 year, the UEFA, FIFA, ECA, the leagues, and of course the players, that we find a solution of the package of measures, including the agents, so that we can make, at least with the new package of measures, we can safeguard the future of professional football, not only in 5 countries, but all over the world. Not only in Europe, but also in Asia, Africa, and of course, America. That is what I hope, and that is what I really do with my colleagues, my best to safeguard the future of professional football, because I travel all over the world. It is the best, most popular sport in the world, and we all have the responsibility to safeguard that also for the next generation and the generation after.
Larry, that would be the first time that I would finish on time. But as my boss, would you allow me to give 5 minutes to the audience to some questions? 10 then, thanks. There's 2 microphones around.
Thank you.
Emmanuel,
Emmanuel Medeiros.
your
2
table
seconds.
is
Bem, a tua mesa é amanhã.
Just a quick note to express appreciation to Soccerex to highlight this topic. It never ceases me to amaze that we can spend the next 20 years discussing the same things and reaching the same conclusions. I cannot remember the numerous times I discussed this with Theo, me representing the leagues and here representing the unions. We were so close to reach a groundbreaking new set of regulations, but because the clubs wanted a free-for-all, a law of the jungle approach, that did not go through, and because of weak leadership from FIFA. Regulations and licensing of agents, I think, are indisputable. The same arguments that I used 5, 10 years, 15 years ago are still on the table. Why? We don't have it. The clearinghouse that you mentioned, I've been a lonely voice defending that. Why don't we have it? Is there anyone who's not in favor of financial integrity and transparency? This is my question. I think time has come not to continue drooling these issues, but to really take action. It is in your hands. Use it.
Thank you. Hold up.
Hi, Mario from Morgan Sports Law and former FIFA legal counsel. I have a question for Theo, and it's regarding Article 17. The last amendment for Article 17 allow basically a club to determine how much they have to pay in case they terminate a contract with a player. So now Article 17 allows a club to actually foresee how much they will have to pay in case they terminate a contract without just cause with a player. It doesn't work the same way for a player. So a player cannot actually know how much they would have to pay a club in case they want to terminate their contract. As we all know, a transfer fee is nothing else than a compensation by the new club to the former club to actually an early termination of the contract. That is what a transfer fee is. So wouldn't you agree that actually the key to fix the system is Article 17? What if Article 17 would say a player can pay the remaining value of his contract and then he's free? The transfer fees are over because the new club would know exactly how much they would have to pay to the former club to have a player. So my question is, why is Article 17 discriminatory in that sense for players? And do you have in your fifth pro agenda a point where actually Article 17 would determine how much a player has to pay to be released from his contract?
It seems you have a supporter.
First of all, I need your address because, I think you can join our organization. Because it's a very, very, very good question. I can tell you this is the agents, but this is, of course, the biggest frustration of the players in general. Just to make it very short, because your question is a very good one. It is ridiculous that when a club wants to get rid of a player, he can then, because of the fact that he is not good enough or whatever, he has to pay in the rest value of the contract. If a player is waiting until the end of the contract because he wants to go to another club, after the Bosman case, as we all know, that is normal for every employee, by the way, then, he will not play. But what everybody forgets and what is not discussable with the clubs is what is happening when a player, we have this, I will not go into detail, but he has a contract and he wants to leave. He breached the contract after the stability period. You have a 5-year contract. After 3 years, according to the rules, at the end of the competition, he is free. Look, agents, you can believe me that will change. And if the player then wants to leave his contract, we have several examples. Then the club is phoning another club who they own. I give you the example. Chelsea is phoning Vitesse because they are the owner of Vitesse. And the only thing what they have to do is to say, give me the commercial value. What do you think is the commercial value of a player? So there is not any player after the jurisprudence of CAS, the appeal in the DRC on the international level has a strongly different opinion about that, but with CAS it's like that. There is not any player after the jurisprudence, I will not mention the cases, that a player has the possibility to leave because he is jointly reliable, so a player can never leave the club after the stability period because nobody knows what is the value? Normally, and that's a part of our negotiations, we have to find a solution for this, that a player, it's not about that he can leave for the rest value of the contract, but there are boundaries in which the player and the buying club, but there is also not a buying club who is taking a player from which he doesn't know how much it costs. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to buy your car if I've never seen your car. So that is one of the biggest issues in the negotiations, and it will be also the most difficult one.
Just one more, and then we're done.
Musa Esdin, sports economist. We are always looking at agents as the only problem in the market, or they are creating a crisis in the market. If we look at the whole market from 12 years up till now, and look at all the transfers, there is kind of inflation created by the superstars and the top clubs. Why are we always pointing on the agents, but not rather on the top clubs' behavior and on the superstars' requests? Is it clubs' effect, agents' effect, or players' effect?
May I just defend the panel?
Yes, please.
I think we made clear that we have problems in all the areas. I think if I would say that the weakest part that contributes to that are the players in general, in my point of view, my humble point of view. But we have problems with the agents. We have bad and good agents. We have bad and good clubs or officials of the clubs. We have, and I think we forgot to mention something that probably will be discussed in our panel tomorrow, Emmanuel. It's about the accountability of the governing bodies. So I think that we made it clear that it's not one side. We're not blaming an agent by itself. It's not good or bad by nature, in my point of view. Can be good, can be bad, can act if it has more space to act because the club gives the space, or the player, then he can have bad actions. So I think that if I synthesize, we didn't blame one or another segment, I think.
Excuse me, I'm not defending any part of it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying from econometric point of view as a researcher, I work with data, with analysis. The club's fixed effect is much higher than agent's effect, according to a study that will be published very soon in the Economic Journal of Sports Finance.
But we mentioned here, I think many of us says that the club usually doesn't need to hire an agent, but because of shady deals or because it seems to need, they hire an agent. So well, I agree with you. I don't know if you want to share any.
No, I fully agree. It's not the, we talk too much about agents if you talk about the whole package of measures. But we cannot deny that, and we can talk about even more statistics, that even you see that now the big problem is that the top clubs will get a position where they, in fact, have a very strong position, which is fine. I have nothing against top clubs. We have top clubs and we have clubs who are on the bottom of the competition. But in the transfer market, and you're right, the data proves that they are now having a position, they can afford them to do everything. I give you an example. Now this, a small club like Ajax, relatively, has a very, very good season. And they, for the first time in 10 years, they make money because they have two very talented players. They sold them. But in the Netherlands, in the other competition, all the other clubs are suffering. And now also, I am happy for Ajax that they have this money, but they have not the best players anymore. So all the best players playing with 5 clubs, or 6 or 7, destroyed the market and destroyed the integrity of football. So you're right. There are much more.
The reason is that it's easier to speculate. It's a free area to speculate in the fees of agents. The scrutiny in regards to salaries or transfer fees are more easy to do. I think so. I'd like to thank you very much for our speakers. I think we should give them some applause. And I would like to thank you all for your participation. Thank you very much.